All right, we're back in. Hello, this is Wednesday, March 13th, Board of Commissioners regular meeting. First up, additions or deletions to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda today.
Okay, then we're going to open up for public comment. Is anybody here who would like to make a public comment? Seeing nobody. With their hand up, that is. We're going to move to commissioner comments. Kelly?
I'll start. Not much today. I would like to congratulate the new Aspen City Council winners in their election, and I look forward to working with Skippy and Rachel in the future.
Excellent. Well said. I'd if I have a chance, I'd like to congratulate Ed and Vardy, local, who's been appointed to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Board. And so we've got some young agrarian talent coming on Parks and Wildlife, and I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. I was going to mention that because, of course, with our Open Space and Trails program, we've really developed a good local ag leasing program, which is being utilized by our young locals in terms of doing local produce. So to have someone locally here like Eden serve on the board, representing Pickens County for Parks and Wildlife, I think is really a good deal. I also want to mention we're in looks like our next cycle of a storm, wet and heavy storm. So I would anticipate there will be more avalanches coming down. So I would encourage people to be careful, stay out of the backcountry. We did have the avalanche that came down on Castle Creek. I really want to thank our Public Works Department, Road and Bridge, who got out there and really quickly was able to open up Castle Creek Road, the Sheriff's Department and Mountain Rescue that we're watching. I did read this morning that Highway 550 over Red Mountain Pass is closed indefinitely with over 60 feet of snow that's come down on that road over a variety of passes. So we're in a major snow cycle here, so let's be careful out there.
I think if I can add to that, I'd love to get a sense of what the snow control is doing this year to our budget. I understand we spent about $9,000 on helicopter avalanche mitigation in Castle Creek and probably Maroon and Castle area. But I also estimate that our plow drivers are doing a lot of overtime.
They're doing a lot of work, and the storms have come very close together with a lot of snow, but we're continuing to be in budget, and we're able to keep our priority roads cleared. You're seeing not as many school closures, I think, as the kids would like because of that. But no, we're working through well right now. We plan for big snow years, and these storms are just coming one on top of the other right now. So we'll be able to give an update. The only really unplanned expenditure at this point was for the avalanche control, where we called in a helicopter to drop, I believe we dropped 10 avalanche control bombs from the helicopter, and that was just over $9,000.
Got it. I think our snowpack, last I checked, was at 140% or so. It's probably gone up from there. That was the last storm. So snowpack's looking good, and maybe the aquifers will be helped out, and Lake Powell may come up a little bit this year. And so that's all great. Anyone else? Steve, got anything to say?
No.
Okay, we're going to keep moving then. We're going to go into consent items. We want to get minutes of the regular meetings February 13th and 27th, and the special meeting of February 26th. I have Jeanette on here, and I think we need a motion to approve.
Yeah, I have one correction. On February 13th, I think we talked about, I don't have that, we had an interview for the Basalt Regional Library, and I think the minutes reflect it was the Pickens County Library. So that was all.
Thanks for catching that. Anyone else? Anything else we want to make a note of? Then I think I need a motion to approve these minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're passing that. Next up, a resolution to partner with Colorado Mountain College in applying for and distributing the Colorado Opportunity Scholarships, COSI, 2018-19 Matching Fund Scholarship. And Charlotte's not here. Got some? Come on down if you're part. You have to identify yourself. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Matt Janeshi. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Colorado Mountain College. This is one that we brought to your county's attention. You may be familiar with the COSI program vaguely. You've seen it a few times. For the past 4 years, the state of Colorado disperses funds to counties that have to then be assigned, or a fiscal agent has to be assigned in the community. It can be a nonprofit or a college, to award the funding to residents of the community for need-based scholarships. They're proportional based upon different income characteristics and sizes of the counties, and so they're all a little different. Colorado Mountain College, we administer this grant for all of the counties in our service area. So that includes Eagle County, Garfield County, Summit County, Lake County, Chaffee County, Routt County, and so forth. The Aspen Community Foundation had been administering it on behalf of Pickens County, as well as with Garfield in partnership with CMC for the past few years, but recently let us know that they would prefer that we become the primary fiscal agent to administer these funds on behalf of Pickens County. And so we're happy to do that. We have to raise our own funding as a match, which we're prepared to do. So there's no financial commitment from the county. It's just authorizing the college to work on behalf of your citizens.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Comments?
A comment. I think it's terrific that CMC is willing to take this over for us. I don't think it would be a burden on you because you're already doing it for all the other counties, and it might actually make it more simple. And this is actually the first time I've heard of this Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative. So could you tell us a little bit about what the types of, how the scholarship program works?
Sure. Thank you. Well, for one, this is our duty, is to serve the citizens of these communities, and so it's really no hardship at all for us. We administer hundreds of millions of dollars, honestly, in financial support for students, but we serve about 20,000 students across our 9-county region that we serve. So just know that it's just part of the process. It's what we do in supporting those students. The program itself has a history that goes back to Governor Hickenlooper's previous days when he was the mayor of Denver and was the chairperson of the Denver Scholarship Foundation. And when he was governor, I should say in full disclosure, I worked in his administration. So I was the deputy executive director of the Department of Higher Ed with Joe Garcia, who was the lieutenant governor at the time. And we were meeting with the governor. We knew we had some money that had been set aside. It's a long story. Over a drink sometime, I'll tell you all about it, about how the money ended up in the state. But the governor had an interest at the time of trying to create or replicate the idea of the Denver Scholarship Foundation throughout the state. So how do you create a 64-county network of scholarship opportunities where there's a connection to the community and a service to local students who are there? So it's not just a scholarship foundation located in a county, but it's on behalf of the county. So there are students that are residents of the community who can be supported by way of the funding. He wanted there to be some skin in the game for institutions to participate, so it wasn't just another state award of some kind. So we have to come up with a dollar-for-dollar match to draw down the funds on behalf of the students. And so that's something that we do through our foundation. And so we have foundation funds that come in and then we award them to the students. As far as the administration of the scholarship itself, it will be, this particular award will be only for Pickens County residents who enroll in Colorado Mountain College at any of our campuses. So if they go to Steamboat, or if they go to Summit, or they stay here, it will only go to a resident of Pickens County who is enrolled at Colorado Mountain College and demonstrates financial need. And then we'll award those students. But it'll happen internally, happens in our financial aid office. They'll run a list of all the students based upon their home addresses that we can identify which students would be eligible. And then we'll work through their packaging to make sure that we award all the funds to those students. And we do that for all the counties, by the way. So it happens, it's a fairly manual process, but we do go through and make sure, just to give you a sense, a juxtaposition is, your award is a fairly modest award compared to, say, Garfield County, a bigger county. We have about $150,000. And so we're working with students from Parachute, all the way up to Basalt and trying to find students who are eligible. But we'll work through the internal process to make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds really terrific.
Yep.
I'm really glad that opportunity is there for the students.
Yep. Thank you.
Fantastic, Matt. Thanks for coming in and describing that to us, because I was not familiar either. It's great to know we've got this partnership and a robust scholarship program. That's great.
Yep, and it is an annual award from the legislature, so it's been running for 4 years. It's in the budget right now, but it's subject to appropriation from the legislature. So we may be back to you next year with the same resolution or not, but at least you'll be familiar with it if it comes back.
So this is something that has to happen annually, John? Is that a necessity that's an annual thing?
Yeah, we've actually, and I think because it's been on consent agenda, Steve, maybe you may not recall, but this does come forward every year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great, fantastic.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution approving the partnership with CMC and applying for and distributing the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Matching Funds Scholarship.
I'll second.
I've got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna keep moving
Thank you.
here. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for coming in. Great to see you. Keep it on. Keep it going there. Doing great. Okay, up next, a resolution ratifying the appointment of Victoria Treese to the Basalt Regional Library Board of Trustees. I think our subcommittee has made a decision and made a recommendation to the board. Is that right?
You're right, so I move to approve.
Do I have to second it since I was on the subcommittee, or I guess someone else can?
No.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Well, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, but we're going to keep moving here. Thank you. That's
Congratulations
great.
to Dre.
Yeah, we're glad to have her. Very nice of her to step up. Okay, individual consideration items. First readings set for public hearings on March 27th, 2019. Resolution approving first quarter budget supplemental requests. And here comes Connie.
Good afternoon. Connie Baker, Picken County Budget Director. We're here today to have the first reading of a resolution for first quarter budget supplemental requests. There are 11 requests in all, and I'll just briefly mention them for the public's sake. In the clerk's office, there's an imaging project that they would like to complete for $7,300, and this is to be paid out of a restricted fund balance, a restricted revenue source that the clerk's office has. In Public Works, they would like to increase the budget for off-highway vehicle enforcement from $35,000 to $50,000, and this is in collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service. In Facilities Department, the South Side Basalt facility, a new facility for us, there's some small remodel projects, and that's a request for $40,000. The Open Space and Trails Fund has 4 different requests. One is for agricultural structure, and that's an increase in the budget from $130,000 to $150,000. The Lazy Glen barn renovation is work that they would like to do for $39,000. And then there's the Soapers Creek Bridge project, which is in conjunction with RAFTA, and the county's share of that in open space is $35,417. Wingo Bridge decking maintenance is another project they'll be taking on this spring and summer, and the request is for $159,295. Then in the airport fund, a request for $1.5 million for aircraft ramp rehabilitation, and also the general aviation lot paving. In the Solid Waste Center, they would like to increase their budget for their operations and maintenance facility by $804,000. $220,000 of this is for permitting, and the remaining $584,000 is for energy efficiency projects. Some of this they think will be covered by a core grant, and then they also have some savings from a previously budgeted solar project. Then also in the Solid Waste Center, a request for $185,000 for groundwater production well. And then the last request is the courthouse renovation project, and this is an increase in the budget from $2.7 million, increasing by $1,778,000. And of this increase, a little over $1 million will come from the general fund.
We wanted to point out on that one that the first estimate for the budget really was a very loose estimate, and that they've come back with details, and this is a more accurate estimate, or for the budget now, this is what they know they need.
Yeah, it was a placeholder for which it was not based on any design documents or such, and so this is the budget number based on the design. So if we miss this one, it is a real miss.
And so all put together, these requests total an increase in Pickens County's 2019 expenditure budget of $5,673,012. That expenditure increase is offset by an increase in revenues of $1,571,250. And that makes a net change in our budget of $4,101,762.
Okay, any questions at this point? We've all seen this a couple of times. I would entertain a motion then.
So I'd move to approve.
You have a comment from over here? I hear- Oh, it's a public hearing. I want to open this. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
I don't think so.
Not?
No, it's a first reading. Public hearing
Set for public hearing on
March
March
27th.
27th. Okay.
So
Well,
I'd
thank you.
move to approve the resolution approving the first quarter budget supplemental requests on first reading set for second reading on March 27th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Kelly. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, Connie. Thanks for coming in. All right, up next, we've got Ryan Neely, an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners accepting a quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel. And I think we're going to keep this open for these three for public hearing, just so.
Actually, Greg, public
Actually, it's not
hearing's
public
set
hearing,
for
sorry,
the
we just went through this.
27th.
This is
That's all right.
Daylight savings time.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, Ryan Neely, Assistant County Attorney.
I'm G.R. Fielding, the county engineer.
And go ahead.
I'm David Scruggs. I'm representing the Aspen Chapel.
Okay, and Kelly has a,
I want to put out there for the board that I am a parishioner at the Aspen Chapel and have made donations to the Aspen Chapel. I don't in return receive any benefit for that except for personal participation.
start over. She's
Is it
confessing.
on? Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I have a little bit of a cold. I am a parishioner at the Aspen Chapel and have made donations to the chapel, and I just wanted to let you all know that. I don't feel like I have a conflict of interest, having not received anything from the chapel in return.
Great, thank you. Full disclosure. And David, you were David Scruggs?
Yes.
Joining us today? Thank you. All right. Okay, and then,
Sarah Oates, I represent the chapel.
okay.
I'm surrounded.
We give
We
up.
said we'd corner 'em.
Anyway, for consideration in front of the board today, this is, there's 3 different ordinances. It's first reading today. Public hearing is set for March 27th. The last ordinance includes a grant of a recreational trail from the Aspen Chapel. That is no longer necessary. We can talk about that a little bit more, but I want to frame that up front. So this first ordinance is an ordinance accepting a quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel. If you take a look at this exhibit map right here, basically what we have going on is an exchange of some property between the chapel and Pickens County. The parcel on the right that's labeled Pickens County right now is currently owned by Picken County. It's managed by Open Space and Trails for parking, and you can see there's a trail easement, or I'm sorry, there's a trail through there. It's also managed as open space. The county acquired that property, I think, in 1975 from an estate. The background of this particular land exchange and how we got here is a long one, from what I understand. I think we'll probably get some more background from John and probably from GR and maybe from Mr. Scruggs as well.
While you're at it, just point out the chapel and the parking lots so anybody watching this will
Yeah.
have a clear idea of what we're looking at.
So I can do that briefly with the exhibit that's in front of you. Right now, the cursor is over the actual chapel, and then as outlined around here, you can see the chapel's parcel. The larger parcel to the east is currently owned by Picken County, and it contains 2 of the 3 parking lots at the chapel. For reference, this is Castle Creek Road, running generally north and south, just to the east of this. And then this is Meadowwood Drive coming off of Castle Creek Road.
Right. Thanks, GR.
And I do want to add just a couple things. There are 3 different ordinances here, so if the board could take 3 different actions on those, that would be great. I know that Sarah has a couple comments too regarding the draft documents, but if John wants to give us a little background, that would be great if you can do that.
Sure. So what brought us here is a long and I'd say tortured history, and one that we hope to resolve through these 3 ordinances. In the early 80s, the county built the extension of Meadowwood Road, and as you can see on the exhibit to the left, and GR, maybe you can point that out, a portion of that county road was built over chapel property. There's no documentation of an easement to do that or any. It seemed to be, frankly, that there was a verbal arrangement with county staff at the time and chapel representatives at the time that was never documented, nor were any ordinances like this one, the ones we have in front of you, executed. So that there was never really that road is still built and has been on chapel property for some time. Over the years, there have been several attempts, frankly, to correct this, and for various reasons, those never fully reached a conclusion. And if you want to dive into all that, we can. I don't think it's necessarily productive. Our most recent conversations, we decided to take a step back, frankly, from the history and look at what are our interests today, and is there a way for us to resolve this through a land swap between the county and the chapel so that the chapel's interests going forward could be met, and the county's interests going forward could be met. And it's really the culmination of those conversations that are represented in the 3 ordinances in front of you today. Particularly those interests for the county had to do, one, with obviously cleaning up the land ownership issue with the road. You know, that we needed to have either a properly recorded easement or property interest for a road to be built on. We also identified some other interests. One was protecting the point of the peninsula there, which is currently owned by the chapel. And GR, can you point out that part of the land swap? Well, also working with the chapel to try and identify what we thought were, I think, both workable and appropriate conditions for future development of the chapel property, which they would not otherwise have unless we placed a restrictive covenant, which is one of the documents in front of you today. David can probably better represent the chapel's interests that are being met with these three documents that were negotiated. And so maybe, David, would you mind if I handed it over to you to represent the chapel?
I'll be glad to. Now, Sarah actually represents them. I am a member of the board of directors and a community member of the chapel. But, first, before I digress, though, I want to thank each and every one of you for serving in the capacity you serve. The federal government presently is dysfunctional, and your policies and decisions are what really serve the people. And I've been to several meetings, and I thank you for serving. So to go to the history, this is actually a 35-year journey. And, and if you don't understand me, I'm a Southern boy, and I grew up on blues, and Etta James had this great song, At Last. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'll have to give John credit. About 3 years ago, they asked me to take on this task to get this finalized. And I interfaced with John, and John has been polite and cooperative. He's represented the county's interest, but he's also listened and tried to assist and help the people. And so I compliment him on that. What we're really struggling with is what everyone struggles with, is the ability to provide employee housing. And we presently, the way our property is configured, we don't really have the land. We do, but it would impact on things we presently have. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to press getting this land swap done, because for 35 years, part of our land had been occupied by Meadowood Drive, and we hadn't received the exchange. And there's a whole series of reasons why the engineers and people in the county left from their position of employment, and the chapel also did not pursue with vigor getting it completed, nor did the county. And the easiest thing to do is do nothing. So we've embarked on this, and what we're really trying to do is make our campus a little larger and contiguous, but at the same time address the concerns that the county has. And what we've done in that is we're exchanging and receiving the second parking lot, which we have a lease for and have been using, and some land just north of that second parking lot. And in exchange, we're giving you, the county, the land on which Meadowood Drive now exists, and we're giving you the point so that you can do some work with your Nordic trails, and that is in the area where your Nordic trail is. And I think that it's a good exchange. I think it meets both interests. We would then, after this is consummated, we would pursue building employee housing. I don't know if you know or not, but the chapel is a very open organization. It is not a denominational. It is not Christian. In fact, if you've noticed, we have a dove on top of our steeple, not a cross. And we share our facility with the Jewish congregation. And that's one reason why we call it employee housing, because there may be the situation where they would want to use that housing. But it costs us about $60,000 a year to house our spiritual leader, and we can build sufficient employee housing with that income stream. And, the other impetus is this is our 50th year. We were formed in 1968. Our main mission was inclusivity, was spiritual, picking up on Pepke's body, mind, and spirit. We think we fulfill a spirit segment of that in Aspen. And we also serve the community. I mean, we have yoga classes, we have meditation, we have community forums. We sponsored a forum in which the county participated concerning the homeless. When the Catholic Church was being renovated, we served as the homeless center. We have art showings, we have musical programs, we have veterans programs. So, we like to think that we are a holistic part of the community, and this is something that we think needed to be done because of the transaction many years ago, but also something that will benefit the community too.
Great, thank you for that summary. Any questions? Steve?
Looking at the fine detail, and I remember the little triangle piece that was an issue a couple of years ago that we looked at. And there's these little pieces along Meadowwood Drive that you can't really tell from the map. There's a tract A and a parcel 7 and a parcel 6. And I think that maybe all of them are already belong to the county. I was just curious.
No, and that's
they
one
in
of
the
the
right-of-way?
things that we've decided to tease apart, basically. One of the things that I think prevented us from bringing this to conclusion in the past was trying to conduct three-way negotiations between Meadowwood, the chapel, and the county. So we've decided to conclude those issues individually. So we're starting with the chapel property. So there will be follow-up cleanup, Steve, with Meadowwood
Okay,
subdivision.
so like the little triangle that will be like given to the Meadowwood Road.
And GR can probably give.
Okay,
Hey,
so
Commissioner-
that doesn't involve the chapel property at all then, is that right?
Commissioner Child, actually, I was the one that instigated that and said that, a three-way negotiation was almost impossible, especially when you have a homeowners association in it, which is Meadowwood. And, it just would never get anywhere. That's part of the 35-year delay. So I asked John to negotiate directly with the chapel concerning only chapel issues. And I think that then the county, after doing this, could pivot and finish up with Meadowwood.
Okay.
GR?
That was very well handled. In my intro, that was a lot less detailed than these gentlemen to my left. I was going to say that this is about step 2 of 4 and everything, and there are several small areas with the Meadowwood Homeowners Association on the west side and on the south side of this that will need to be cleaned up. But most of that, because it deals with the road, is the transition from one portion of the road to the next. So in reality, it's not that consequential at this time.
What's the condition of the road just going through there?
To be honest, I haven't gone through and done an evaluation of it in some time. I know that
In very good shape. The parking lots aren't, but the road is.
So we're giving you a wholly inimmaculate parking lot. You're giving us a holy but immaculate piece of road in exchange?
He out negotiated.
Who cut this deal?
He's getting the high land and we're getting the low land.
George?
So part of this exchange is we're giving you one of the parking lots, the upper parking lot. We retain the lower parking lot that people utilize for access, for trail, for biking and whatever. We're currently maintaining both of those lots or all three? How's the maintenance will be handled going forward?
My understanding is that Open Space and Trails is currently maintaining the lower 2 lots. I do not know the answer. Mr. Scruggs, does the church intend to take over maintenance of the second parking lot there?
We'll take any help y'all will give us, but I will say we have been maintaining that lot. We plow that lot. We, fill the holes when we can. But what I would like to do is, and this doesn't need to be part of the bargain, but if and when the county does do work in the second lot, we'd like to coordinate with them to maybe tag along to be able to have that work done economically for us too. But we will be taking responsibility for our property.
Okay, and then I may be getting ahead of myself here, but on the restrictive covenant, that pertains to our trail?
No, I'm sorry. The restrictive covenant will be pertinent to the new, what is the existing chapel property, and then the portions of the property that they're acquiring from the county, should you take this action to grant the chapel a quitclaim deed here.
So we won't have to relocate the trail as it is?
No, one of the, there was an initial thought that the county would need a trail easement to cross that hatched property that is the corner up there. And you can see where the trail easement kind of comes into that particular location. But since the chapel is going to go ahead and quitclaim that to the county. We don't need that for the Nordic Trail anymore. We still got to clean some things up with Meadowwood on the west side of the property, but we no longer need a trail easement from the chapel, and I think everybody's on board with that as far as I can tell. And I've run that by Open Space and Trails as well, so they agree.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to ask if I could, are you questions? 'Cause I don't want to jump in front of you.
I'm good.
Just regarding the status of the parking lots, the second two, the east side, or I guess it's southeast side parking lots have been used by the public, as we know, for years for cyclists on Castle Creek Road and overflows for various events up and down the valley. And I'm just wondering if the chapel has discussed any changes to that, because it's a great public resource. And if we're going to shut down a parking lot sometime in the future or discuss it, I think we ought to, have a sense of where that's going. It'd be a shame to lose the resource, but I also understand the chapel may have other needs there. So,
Right, well, we're required under the restrictive covenant to maintain a certain number of parking places, and we would have to keep that parking lot there to maintain that number of parking places. And the reason why, as John pointed out, it's in the county's interest to not have us parking on Meadowwood, because that is a safety issue, be safety issue to the people coming to our chapel anyway. I'm there a lot, and the lower lot, which you're maintaining, is the one that usually is occupied by people hiking and biking up Castle Creek Road. There have been sometimes some permanent parking there of construction equipment. Some might be associated with the county or not. But we hadn't had, it's not very often that the second lot is used by them.
great.
I think your capacity is still there.
Great, good to know. But I do know, I've seen, say there's a memorial service or something, you can fill the whole thing up, and it's great to have it there.
That it is.
Yeah, okay. Greg,
I
right?
think Sarah wants an opportunity
Yeah.
to comment on
Please.
just a couple things.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on the restrictive covenant. So we began talking with the county in 2017 about this, and I believe it's been in front of the board. It's just been a while. And the board at the time identified a couple things with the development of the property. And of course, all this has been framed under the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Person Act, which I know you guys are all familiar with from the Grace Church. So the discussion was how much of a review will the county undergo. The things that were identified at the time were the parking, as you pointed out, the view of the church from the west, so, looking up valley, and then the Nordic easement. And we've already dispensed with the Nordic easement. It's not on the property. The county did do a parking count, so we've captured the number of parking spaces per the county parking count, and those have to be maintained, with the exception of possibly 2 to 3 spaces in order to do trash, wildlife proof trash if we need to. And then we've also adjusted the height. The height is limited to the eave, how the eave of the roof comes down over those walkways, and so the height of any addition for a meeting space on the chapel building itself will be limited to that eave height. And then there were a couple items in the draft covenant that I just wanted to mention, and then Rye and I will work through them before second reading. The first is there is a reference in paragraph 1 to the parsonage, and given the composition of the church and its partnership with the Aspen Jewish congregation, I think we'd prefer to label it something like chapel residence, so something a little less antiquated, I guess. So that's the one item. And then in speaking with John Ely initially, and I'm trying to find it here. It is let's see.
It's in chapel.
So it's page, the one she was previously referring to was on page 2
Okay.
of the restrictive
right.
covenant. We were at item number 1.
Yeah. item 1. And then also in that paragraph, there was a red line addition of activity and site plan review. And in our initial discussions with John Ely, the covenant was going to substitute for any land use review, so we just need to flush that out on the legal end of things. So. But we really appreciate the county's assistance with that, and as David pointed out, with the 50th anniversary, this will really help kind of kick things off and get fundraising going to be able to get moving on possibly a chapel residence. So,
Have you identified a location, vague idea where the residents would go?
Well, actually, that's part of our 50th anniversary. We just had a seminar, and I would invite all of y'all to come to the seminars we have in conjunction with our 50th, but Harry Teague was there and explained the architecture, its background, all the influences on it, and we are planning to we may ask him or others to help us with an overall plan. But you know, it's the chicken and the egg. We have to have the land first, and that's what we've been concentrating on. But that will be our next process.
Great. All right. Thank you. Fair enough. Kelly?
I guess I'm just wondering if the trail question has been taken care of. Does it make sense to hold off on the restrictive covenant until sort of the site plan discussions have worked themselves out more?
Kelly, I'm not sure how the trail is linked to that, but you know, to the extent that there's already been some kind of agreement about the level of land use review that needs to take place, I'll certainly double check that. I think it makes sense to get through it on first reading today, and if there's an issue before second reading, we can flag that before the board.
And this is coming not really from a definite sense of concern, but just trying to understand how these processes typically unfold.
Of course, generally, if there is going to be some additional structure placed on another parcel in Pitkin County, it would be subject to activity envelope and site plan review. I'm pretty confident that doing that does not get in the way of the particular statute that Sarah just cited, but if there's, like I said, if there's already been a prior agreement to forego that, I was not aware of that, so we can certainly include that, and I'll flesh it out before you guys see this again.
Okay.
So.
And then also, I'd just say from the standpoint of the chapel, you know, we do have certain rights under that federal act, but I don't want it to be misconstrued by you. We consider ourselves an integral part of this community. We certainly want to share our plans with both the county and the neighborhood, and we're nowhere close to that because first of all, we have to have land. Second, we have to raise the money. And those are two difficult hurdles. But what I want to make sure you understand is we do want to share what our plans are.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And the restrictive covenant does speak to some of the concerns that had popped up outside of the Nordic easement issue. And so it does include the height limitation as well as the parking, which has been brought up before.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Now, do we want to go through all of these? How do we need to do each one individually?
Yeah, I think if you could just take an action on each one individually, so, you know.
I'm looking for a motion regarding the quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel.
I make a motion approving an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, accepting a quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're going to move on to the next one. Colorado granting a quitclaim deed from Pitkin County to the Aspen Chapel. No other information gets added here. We're all right. So do I get a motion?
I'll move to approve the ordinance of the BOCC to grant a quitclaim deed to the Aspen Chapel.
Second.
Okay, got a second. All in favor on that?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And finally, an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners, Pitkin County, Colorado, accepting a restrictive covenant from the Aspen Chapel.
I'd make a motion to approve, and then with the knowledge that we're going to come back with some acceptance of the wording that's been redlined and followed up and to ensure that the Nordic Trail will not be compromised in any way.
I'll second.
We have a second. Further discussion? I just wanted to say I appreciate what you've put into your restrictive covenants. The chapel has always been such an icon and a fantastic facility. I know you're not looking to do anything ostentatious. You've got height limits, and it's such a beautiful place. I think everyone's so aware of that I really appreciate how you're moving forward with this. Steve?
Just a comment. I think my dad was involved in this about 25 or 30 years ago, probably.
No doubt.
I remember him
blame it
talking
on your
about
dad?
Meadowwood Drive and in relation to the chapel. And it's really kind of odd that it never was resolved in all the meantime, but this
about
this
time you fixed it.
board these last few years has been a board of getting things accomplished, so I think maybe that's why we're actually getting it done now.
If you don't mind, if I could just add on, I just want to thank the chapel community, David, you. It would have been really easy to dig heels in on 35 years of baggage, which is really, I think, what a lot of these conversations represented. And it really took both parties stepping back and saying, let's start over and let's talk about what our mutual interests are and our how we can benefit the community in both of our organizations. And the chapel came to the conversations that way, and that made it a lot easier to resolve a long-standing, what really was a long-standing conflict between the entities. So appreciate that.
Well, we consider ourselves a community asset, and we appreciate your help on that.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So every time we drive near the roundabout, my daughter points and says, Jesus' house, Jesus' house, and asks if we're going. And, the chapel's been a meaningful part of our lives and in the community, and I just want to wish you well in the next 50 years.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to call it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank
Got
you.
that done. Now, 35 years and 15 minutes? We got it done.
Only half my lifetime.
We've righted a wrong that Steve's been worried
back
about all this time. Sarah, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I have individual consideration items, public hearing, second reading coming up next. We're going to, Sarah, and Rye, we're going to move into our next. Now, Karen's not here yet.
I can probably take this. I won't have slides for you, though.
Got it. Okay, so we have, as I said, individual consideration items, public hearing, second reading, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement between Pitkin County, Aspen School District, Aspen Valley Hospital, and the City of Aspen for the purchase of vital mental health services. And take it away, John.
Thank you, Greg. You guys have had a number of both work sessions and a presentation on first reading on this intergovernmental agreement. And really, this started with our 2016 Citizen Attitude Survey. And in that survey, one of the areas that was identified as being highly important to our community and also an area in need of improvement was the delivery of mental health services. And so following on that community survey, the county took lead in convening a conversation of all the partners who were providing funding, either in the form of grants or contracts or what have you, for mental health services, as well as providers. And that conversation resulted in a recommendation. Hi, Karen, come on in. I started for you. So
fast. I'm
yeah,
sorry. I didn't expect it.
Oh, yeah,
so
we're
if you
getting
have slides, go ahead and load them. But otherwise, I'm going to finish my spiel.
Sure.
And you can, that that community conversation resulted in a continuum being identified that was necessary for providing the level of mental health and behavioral health and substance abuse services that our community needs and demands. And we identified the gaps within that continuum. We then brought all the partners together who are providing funding to agree to do a couple of things. One was to pool the funding with a fiscal agent. In this case, the county agreed to be the fiscal agent, which is really the intergovernmental agreement that's in front of you today, and then to participate in a request for proposal process, an RFP process that would identify not only the services within that continuum as identified in the community conversation, but the levels of service that we're expecting to receive. That RFP went out, and we had, I think, 3 responses. Was it 3 or 2? 2 or 3 responses. I can't remember. 3 responses. And it was awarded to a joint proposal from Mind Springs Health and Mountain Family Health Centers to provide a scope of services that covered response to the hospital, law enforcement entities, and the school district. And so you received reports about how that partnership was progressing and the results that we're seeing, both in terms of number of clients served, reduced response times, and better coordination between our entities. And this IGA will allow us to continue that partnership for another year. So Karen, what?
Great.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Before you start, I just wanted to say that John, it's your work again with this creating this partnership and this IGA. I think I wanted to compliment you on your skills on making this work, because everyone I talk to in this partnership says that you're kind of the key element that makes it fly. And what's happened as a result, and hopefully you'll get into this too, is that I think we've seen just incredible progress on the part of all the players now. Mountain Family Health happened to be down there last night, and they are on fire. They're doing such great work, and they're so charged up. I know Mind Springs as well has been, I think, exceeding our expectations, and so I'm eager to hear about. But I want to make sure that people understand that John was critical to making all this happen. Once again, George?
I also want to mention, as we looked at the budgetary impact, the bulk of this, over $300,000, comes from the Healthy Community Fund. So I really want to thank the public, the electorate, who voted to support the continuation of the Healthy Community Fund last November, because we could see how these dollars are critical and are being utilized for the benefit of the community.
Sure. Great.
Okay, that teed you right up, Karen.
Sure. So Karen Penniman, Public Health Director, and we did the work session. So as John alluded to, you've seen the metrics and you've seen what we've been evaluating for the last year, and have seen some really significant changes in some of the services that have been provided, both in quality and in responsiveness for the last year. And one of the goals of this group coming together was really the word rapid was part of the vision and the mission. So how do we rapidly change the mental health system within the community to ensure that people are really getting access to quality services in a timely fashion? And from the numbers that we've seen, that we did rapidly change the system. It's actually pretty incredible with the amount of data that we have, because we really didn't start monitoring it until March, when we got everything fully up and running, until December. And so that's a short, really, amount of time to make some significant change. And I think when you heard from our partners, the City of Aspen and the hospital and the school district, you heard that they saw a significant change within their own practices of working with both entities, Mind Springs Health and Mountain Family, and that they've heard from their staff that they've seen, that they feel it's palpable, they feel the change on the ground level. So it was an innovative way of going about business. It was a risk to look at things differently, and the risk paid off. And so we're really excited to continue this partnership, to continue to look at the metrics that we established in 2018, but also we've established more outcome metrics for 2019, and really looking at what's the true impact to the person that's actually receiving the services. Are they feeling like this has changed their trajectory in their mental health world or substance use world? So we're really looking at that, more client satisfaction surveys and more pieces to really get on the ground to get a sense from people what they're experiencing. So I'm excited about that. We had to establish some really baseline metrics to begin with, and now we'll have 2 years of those metrics in addition to some others. So it's exciting. Many of our partners, I don't know if anyone's here because I had the timing off on this, obviously. So they're planning on coming later. I'll let them know that they can also submit some information for you, but they were all here at the work session. So hopefully you heard from them and got a sense of what that was.
Spread of a lot of people here.
Sure. So that's what I have. Is if you have any additional questions for me about moving forward with the IGA.
I wanted to, well, I don't know how closely related it is, but the thing that's exciting about this is this represents opportunities for a change in how health care is delivered to our community. And mental health care in particular, being part of the integrated health care programs with Mountain Family, it's a bit revolutionary, really, to think that you can go and see the dentist or the doctor, but they're going to have the ability to help you if you happen to have a mental health issue that's maybe you haven't identified it, but they might be able to. The warm handoff, it's called. So you're to help integrate people into a mental health program that's not helps reduce stigma and helps reduce that fear of speaking to someone. And it's working already, according to the Mountain Family Health people. They seem so excited about it. I just encourage everyone to explore this, everyone in the community to explore this.
Right.
Anything you can add to that? Any questions?
I mean, I usually would appreciate seeing a mental health person before I see my dentist.
Exactly.
Well, and I think I was talking with a community member yesterday, and he's really an advocate for normalizing the conversation around mental health, right? Like you're talking about your broken arm, you're talking about going to see your therapist, and it's the same. You feel the comfort level is the same. And I think part of integrated healthcare is that, like you said, Greg, it destigmatizes and normalizes that conversation. And it also is the PQ2, which is just 2 questions that they ask you when you walk through the door. Your primary care physician is so crucial because it's simple, it's easy. They then refer you to a mental health provider if that's what's needed, or they're just kind of monitoring you over the years to see how you're doing with your mental health. And I think by your primary care physician asking you those questions, it normalizes it. And then, as you know, when Gary showed the stats, people who have completed suicide, they've seen their primary care physician within months of doing that. The stats are really high, and so less than a month. So I think that connection to your primary care physician and integrated care is really, really crucial and really important, right? Because we're a holistic being. We don't just take our teeth out or our eyes out or our brain out. It's all part of the same system. So we want to make sure that we're looking at it holistically.
And it turns out your dental health care is very connected to your cardiac health, your mental health.
Right.
If you've got teeth problems, they could be leading somewhere else fairly rapidly. So it's great to see people who are looking at the whole picture. So thank you for that spiel.
Sure.
Anything else from anybody?
It's a public hearing.
It's a public hearing.
Right.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public? Even if they're on staff or here on another issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I guess I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this resolution approving an IGA between Pitkin County, the Aspen School District, Aspen Valley Hospital, and City of Aspen for the purchase of vital mental health services.
I'll second.
And we have a second. Further discussion, Steve?
I know that Mine Springs Health isn't listed on this group, but they're a vital part of the partnership also.
Right.
And I just to recognize them, because they're the ones on the ground doing the work with our patients. So.
And if I could add, we also, through the Healthy Community Fund, not necessarily part of this RFP, but we have a contract with the Hope Center too to do critical incident response, and we've coordinated our protocols for all those agencies working together, concentrating in specific areas of that continuum of service, and it really is kind of hitting the marks of what we were hoping to achieve a year ago.
Right, great.
And also, this is not a moment too soon. Every time we lose someone else to suicide, it just hurts so badly, and hopefully we'll have fewer and fewer of those going into the future.
Absolutely.
I think it's an opportunity as this is formed, and hopefully there'll be some publicity about what's happening here with this agreement going forward again, but with Mountain Family Health and the new facility, of which we are the landlord and a partner. I think you mentioned suicide prevention. We also have addiction. We have substance abuse issues, and Mine Springs and Mountain Family are all, part of the solution to that, and Hope Center as well. So thank you for recognizing Hope Center with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really want to we're really looking at that whole continuum of care. So prevention to aftercare and all the players that fit into that role. So the critical incident response is really a wonderful niche that the Hope Center is stellar at. When someone dies in the back country, and that wraparound service that they provide for the family after that happens. That's what we're referring to as critical incident, and they are masters at fulfilling that work. And so we really look at all of our partners, A Way Out, Pathfinders. There's so many, Aspen Strong, so many partners within the mental health continuum that we really support through the Healthy Community Fund and in other ways. So.
We're very fortunate in that regard. We have so many great entities that are doing heavy lifting on our behalf. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, got her
Thank
done.
you. Sorry about that. Sorry about
Coming.
the
We just need to publicize this thing so people start checking out the Mountain Family in particular to see what's going on down there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Help them with that. Okay.
Okay, we're moving on here to land use items. Are we all good? Do you need a break?
Yeah, do a short break.
Okay, 5-minute break, Grassroots, 5 minutes.
Like your bolo tie, Steve.
Back at 1:07. Is that enough? I'm gonna get a drink of water. Okay, we're back with our Wednesday, March 13th meeting. We're in land use items, and we have a land use public hearing today. And this is for an ordinance authorizing acceptance of an amended protective covenant for Helvetica Endeavors LLC. This is the second reading on that public hearing, and Leslie is here.
Hi, I'm Leslie Lamont, and I'm a senior planner at the Community Development Department. And the applicant, Marshall Hall, whom thought you guys were gonna take a little bit more time. So he's representing Helvetica, which is a family interest, and he requests to amend a recorded covenant to remove the prohibition against condominiumization. The language that prohibits further subdivision is intended to remain a condition of approval in the amended covenant. So this is second reading of the ordinance to amend a recorded covenant, and it is also a review of a resolution to amend your 2006 BOCC resolution that required the covenant and required the language in the covenant. So the subject property is right here. It's 1654 and 1656 Castle Creek Drive. And it's just outside the urban growth boundary. It is zoned AR10 and is just under 14 acres in size.
There's Marshall.
Hi, Marshall. Here, sit
Come
right
on
here.
down, have a seat. Welcome. Glad you made it.
I am doing it early. I know, sorry.
Yeah,
I
we're
called you
moving
back.
ahead of schedule.
So there are 2 single-family homes on the property, 2 garages, and a caretaker dwelling unit. So the property was first developed in 1958 and occupied by Edgar Stern of the music school. The Hall family started Aspen Country Day School and moved on to the property in 1969. In 1973, the property was subdivided into 2 lots, the Hall property and then the MAA campus. And in 1973, there's some Planning and Zoning Commission documentation that references a single-family home and guest quarters. And in 1984, a building permit was issued with language that deemed 2 units as legal units. In 2001, the BOCC approved GMQS exemption and special review for replacement units, expansion of a non-conforming structure, and a caretaker dwelling unit. A covenant was required at the time to prohibit further subdivision of the property. In 2006, the BOCC considered a similar application to reinstate their vested rights, to consider some minor amendments to the 2001 approval. And at the time, the covenant was amended. When the covenant was amended, the language said no further subdivision or condominiumization. So the applicant requests to remove the term condominiumization from the covenant. Staff recommends that the term condominiumization is removed and a new covenant recorded that maintains the provision against further subdivision. According to Section 4-30-40 of our Land Use Code, compliance with Colorado Revised Statutes shall set forth for common interest communities. The code states that the creation of condominiums or cooperatives is not a land use approval, and the creation of condominiums or cooperatives does not affect a subdivision of land. This application was referred to the Castle Creek Caucus, and Joe Wells, on behalf of the caucus, submitted comments, but his letter missed our packet deadline. So he submitted, though, that letter to you, I saw via email, as well as an adjacent property owner submitted comments to Joe that Joe then sent to you all and me. And I have made sure that Jeanette Jones has received both those written comments. And Marshall is here to address his request, and we'll take any questions.
Okay. Staff questions at this point? Do you want to move on to Marshall? Go ahead, Kelly.
Can you please explain again why staff supports the removal of condominiumization from the covenant?
Well, I'll let Rye talk about kind of the Colorado revised statutes and how that's kind of dictating the language in the code. But I do want to say that in 2001, in looking at the minutes from the 2001 meeting, it was a request of Commissioner Ireland to add no further subdivision in the form of a covenant on the property. In 2006, when I looked at the staff's memo and the minutes from the BOCC meeting, there was no discussion about that. So, and it's my assumption. My assumption is that when they amended the covenant and staff was looking at no further subdivision, they added the term condominiumization.
All right. Sorry. So, as Leslie alluded to, there was this addition of this prohibition against further condominiumization that was added to the covenant in 2006. There was a period of time where it appears from some of the approvals that adding that particular prohibition was kind of a boilerplate addition to some of the land use approvals that were taking place at the time. As Leslie mentioned, both the land use code and the land use code recognizes that state law prohibits zoning regulations that make impossible or restrict the condominium form of ownership. So basically, looking back at the approval process, it appeared that this condominiumization language wasn't really a bargain for a term or anything like that. And as it is used consistently as a boilerplate addition to some of the land use approvals, starts to run afoul of that state law that prevents us from just prohibiting the condominium form of ownership.
Got it.
So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Marshall, you'd like.
Yeah, I just wanted to just reiterate, when we did this, we thought this was just an administrative procedure and was not a negotiation of any type. What I would like to do while I'm here is revisit the big picture for this property and where we would like to go and get some idea of if there's any support for that and whether it's worth proceeding with. So I also want to make sure, I don't know if it was mentioned, but in an attempt to acquire additional square footage needed to preserve all of our citizen housing, I submitted a GMQS application. My goal was to get the project as close to the end zone as possible under existing code and then come to you to see if you wanted to get it over the line. Unfortunately, GMQS is reserved for the exclusive use of those wishing to build a mansion and is not available to those wishing to preserve smaller structures that are actually lived in. Anyone trying to do this is literally non-conforming under the land use code with a strong implication that they should try to conform with it. Let's think about this for a minute. Let's pull back and look at the bird's eye view of what market forces channeled by our land use code has wrought over the last generation. Thousands of modest-sized houses, just like ours, were torn down and sent to the dump. In their place, much larger and sometimes truly massive houses were constructed that typically no one lives in. Over 3,000 employee housing units were constructed. Unfortunately, this massive building boom was not sufficient, and now we have 7,500 workers commuting daily. And we've also precipitated a massive housing boom down valley. With a notable exception of preserving open space and views, this is devastating consequences for a community and especially our environment. And it didn't have to be this way. I much prefer the way our property was developed over what is typical, and I think our neighbors would agree with that. We actually have development rights for almost 9,000 square feet of area that contains 10 bedrooms. By spreading that out over 3 separate structures, it blends into the environment much better than if it was consolidated, and does a better job of preserving our open space and views. It also does a much better job of providing citizen housing. Ironically, I think that most would agree that the worst thing that could happen to our property would be to bring it into compliance with Pickens County Land Use Code. That should give you serious reason to pause. It's a total fluke that our property is configured the way it is, with multiple structures. It was built in 1958 when Edgar Stern submitted a one-page application to the building department. And in all fairness, I should point out that it was double-sided. The land use code was never supported multiple structures. In fact, when we first approached the building department in the late 90s, we were told we could not do anything with our second structure. We couldn't remodel it or replace it. They just wanted it to fall down and go away, and that's literally what they told us. We jumped at the chance to replace it when the code was changed to allow it. It's a good thing we did, because that exemption didn't last very long. What would have happened if we allowed 2 or 3 smaller structures instead of just one large one? Many of our parents' generation could have sold half of their holdings instead of all of it. We would have a much better mix of housing sizes and more of them would be lived in. The amount of new development could have been greatly reduced, while the total amount of square feet would be the same or even less than it is today. I believe this approach meets many more of the goals established in the Community Area Plan and the various caucus master plans than does the current code. The middle of the housing market, consisting primarily of citizen housing in the 2,500 to 4,000 square foot range, has been wiped out. Market forces combined with the land use code has forced building sizes to 2 extremes. Mansions of up to 15,000 square feet on the high end, and employee housing that topped out at a whopping 1,500 square feet on the low end. So I urge you to aggressively create a new path through the land use code that preserves modestly sized housing. I think we offer a good model of what can work. I think you should look at reenacting the exemptions that made our project possible in the first place. But I think you should extend it beyond the rare legal non-conforming site like ours that already has multiple building sites. I think this should be treated as a conforming use and placed on the same level as a mansion. I think that points should be available with the GMQS process to encourage the preservation of citizen housing. I have offered to propose a citizen housing zone district designed to empower the private sector to provide housing where it is willing and able to do so. This will be time-consuming and a speculative venture for me, so I'd like to have an indication from you as whether or not you want me to pursue this and are interested in considering it.
Thank you, Marshall. Questions, board? I'm concerned that we've strayed a little bit outside we're looking at, it'd be interesting to contemplate what you're proposing at a future date for the county land use code. Getting back specifically to this parcel, I'll like to hear what others think and what direction we need to go. Steve?
I do have a question, and this comes from Joe Wells' letter of the 16 January. And Leslie, maybe you could, or maybe Suzanne could answer. So it says the fact that the current underlying zoning of the property does not permit separate ownership of the residences. Is that in fact the case or not for the zoning of that particular parcel?
Yeah, I can answer that for you, Steve. That is essentially correct, and that is the case for all lots and parcels in Pickens County, is you're only allowed to have one principal dwelling use on the property. In this case, there are 2 principal dwelling uses on the property. And the reason for that is mostly the history that Leslie laid out for you, but the code recognizes the second dwelling unit on the property as a legal non-conforming use and structure on the property. So that is the unique circumstance with Mr. Hall's property here. There are some other properties around the county, as you can imagine, that do have two principal dwelling uses, and those have been, will be, or potentially will be recognized as legal non-conforming use of the property if they can demonstrate that, or the property owner can demonstrate that. So is that pretty clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not just a zone-specific analysis, it's county-wide, really. So yeah.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Well, when I look at the history of this whole thing and those, the word "and condominiumization" was added in 2006. If that hadn't been added, we wouldn't be sitting here today, probably.
Sure.
It's kind of a puzzle why those words were added, but
True.
I think it maybe was an era when a condominium was looked at upon as a bad thing, and we maybe didn't have that many of them, and or maybe it was a new concept in the county that people were afraid of at the time.
Sure.
So this is a public hearing, and we have someone from the public who may want to speak. Joe's letter is already before us. Please come on over. Thank you for your letters. My first question, clearly, I think you'll need to explain your position, or the caucus position, in lay terms, for me at least. So start at the beginning, if you don't mind.
Yeah, first of all, I'm Joe Wells, coordinator of the Castle Creek Caucus. You may be disappointed, Greg, to hear me say these remarks are my own. They're not the caucus's remarks. I did receive 6 comments of support for my letter, and one of those was Mr. Hassenflu's letter, the next door neighbor. And I also received a letter of clarification from Marshall. But these comments are strictly my own and haven't been endorsed by the caucus as a whole. I submitted those comments to Jeanette as she left the room. I've reviewed the staff recommendation. I met with Leslie to understand why the staff was supporting this. I now understand that essentially the county regulations have now been brought into conformance with Kiowa, which is the statute that comes into play on this issue. I'm still puzzled by why this issue didn't come up in 2006. Kiowa went into effect in 1992, and I assume it hasn't been broadly amended in the interim period. But I went back to research the record of the 2006 action, and unfortunately there are very few minutes of that meeting. It's a very curt set of minutes. I look at what the commissioners approved in 2006, and it just simply tells me that they obviously didn't want to allow condominiumization or subdivision as a part of granting an additional 4,000 square feet of development rights on this property. I think it's unfortunate that the issue wasn't objected to by the owners back in 2006. They voluntarily recorded a covenant restricting the property against condominiumization and then proceeded with the development. So I think it's unfortunate that we're now coming back and revisiting the issue. But we are here today to try to get into compliance with Kiowa. So those are my comments.
All right, thank you. Board comment? Steve?
One other comment about what is allowed for, what would the maximum size each house or the entire property would be allowed to build to? And would that be, is it a certain amount for the whole property and that has to be divided between the different buildings or different dwelling units?
Well, in 2006, the resolution lays out pretty specifically how much square footage was allowed to be added to the property and to which of the units, including the garage and the caretaker dwelling unit. So right now, that is what is allowed on the property today.
Because I think my fear would be that, you know, it's all fine and good today with the people who are here, and then you have the next owner or the next generation, and all of a sudden somebody wants to build a bigger house, and would
Sure, Steve.
eventually try to change the rules or ignore what had been decided in the past or whatever to try to get a bigger house through. And I think the intent is to have houses that real people are living in, that people who work here are living in, and a more modest sized house like is there already is more suitable for that than.
Sure, I think there's two things to think about here, Steve, and then I don't want to stray too far into the idea of increasing the size of the structures on the property right now, because Mr. Hall does have an application in the Community Development Department for GMQS allotment for his property. I think one thing to consider when the board's discussing removing the covenant prohibiting further condominiumization on the property is we're not at this point talking about an increase in density on the property. We're not talking about the ability to add another structure on the property or anything like that. But if this board has the occasion to review the GMQS application, if it were kicked up to you from the P&Z or something like that, then you'd have the ability to weigh in on whether larger house sizes are available. The lot is restricted to 15,000 square feet total. Leslie would have to remind me about exactly how much square footage is on the property right now. I think it's around 8,900 or something like that. So potentially additional square footage allotment to the property could go up to that 15,000 square foot mark. Now, there are provisions in the land use code that provide for expansion, or that guide the expansion of non-conforming uses and structures on the property, and those particular provisions of the code would be applied if Mr. Hall were to request expanding one of the non-conforming structures on the property.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that then? So one step further, I'm assuming that would then trigger a need to come in and do this again for other elements of the restricted covenant.
Yeah, so that's a perceptive question, Kelly. The 2006 approval included a request from the BOCC to allow expansion of a non-conforming structure or use on the property. If Mr. Hall were to want to expand a non-conformity on his property, that is a BOCC review.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so to summarize here, it sounds like staying with what's before us today, we're probably ready unless someone else, staff, has anything else they want to add. Our public hearing is still open, but seeing no one else coming in, I'm ready for a motion.
I would suggest closing the public hearing.
Should I close the public hearing? Thank you, George.
Yeah, close it.
We're closing the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance authorizing acceptance of an amended.
Resolution. You said ordinance.
Yeah, that's what it says on our.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing,
Amended
There's two
protective
separate
covenant
actions.
We've got an order. Oh,
for
you're doing
got
number
two,
9.
right.
Helvetica. So just to clarify, the ordinance required 2 readings, the resolution did not. So we'll do, I think, the ordinance first and then the resolution.
Thank you.
listed.
Yes,
Okay.
ordinance first.
For
Number 9.
Helvetica Endeavors.
Second?
I have a second. Further discussion? Was that a,
Yeah, I just want to comment that, there's some real substantive issues related to this property that I think merit a discussion outside of this particular cleanup action that we need to do. And I just want to sort of encourage that with the planning department. And, for my own interest, I'll probably just talk to you guys about other code cleanup things that are potentially on the table, but I think that's very separate from what this narrow requirement here is to bring us into compliance with Colorado law.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. And then we have the resolution of granting approval to Helvetic Endeavors to amend BOC Resolution Number 122-2006, which approved EMQS exemption for replacement units, 1041 hazard review, and special review for a CDU. This was continued from 227.
I will move to approve that resolution.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Further comment?
You probably have to reopen it.
Do I have to reopen public hearing on this? I'll reopen the public hearing before. Okay, we have no comment from the public. No comment from the board.
So I would close the public hearing.
We're going to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Done with that.
Great, thank
Moving
you.
right along. Look forward to the furthering conversation. Thank you, Marshall, for coming in. Joe, thank you for coming. Leslie, nice to see you. Okay. Moving on to open discussion.
And I know Kara was planning on coming down to give you guys an update on our internet service provider selection process. So hopefully she's listening and is on her way down.
Kara, where are you?
You should have a monitor on the
Time
stairs.
I'll fill it with a rendition. No. But just while we're waiting for Kara, just give you guys an update. The county has been offering mental health first aid courses. Our April course filled up, so we're filling up our June courses. So that's going well. And that's about all I had for open discussion, except for Kara here.
Kelly?
I just have a little legislative update. So we're going to dive in, I think, more when Kara provides a real organized layout of legislation that we may decide as a board to get more active on. But some things are moving really fast. And so the oil and gas legislation that CC4CA, of which we're a member, has prioritized, passed the Senate today. I just want to give you an update on that. So that'll move to the House. It's
Well, that's
flying.
good.
It's been
It's
fast.
interesting. I'm starting to see ads, TV ads opposing that, providing, as usual, misinformation, but that's for the norm, for the course.
And I didn't know if you wanted to offer a little insight on that about the
Yeah, I mean,
authorities it would give the county.
Yeah, additional 1041 powers, looking at local control of particular issues. And this board certainly has historically been interested in those issues. So I have, touched base with Kara about this particular legislation, anticipating there might be some interest on the board's behalf.
Yeah, and I noticed, some county commissioners are taking a stance on another bill regarding the red flag. Is that what's called a red flag? And they're tying into a Second Amendment issue, which really is not. And I just wonder, I know our sheriff has supported it, and I wonder whether we should take a stance on that, since other county commissioners are taking stances as well.
Yeah.
I think so. That my understanding has already passed. So from a legislative perspective, we that is done. I think what is being considered now by some counties, and I don't know if this is allowed under the new law or not, is being called what's called a sanctuary county
Oh, okay.
from
All right.
those rules. So
That's what they're
that
voting
certainly, my discussions with Joe would not be our sheriff's recommendation that we adopt that.
Yeah, the sanctuary county sort of resolutions that have come out are really public policy statements. I think that the ones I've reviewed, at least with some attorney advice, they've been pretty careful not to actually state that they're exempt from it or any of the other stuff. It's really a policy statement.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that update.
I think it's a real public health thing too. I mean, if it's hard to talk about suicide and not look at the use of guns in committing of suicide. And from what I understand from our public health department in our community, so hopefully this will just be another tool to help that.
Okay.
I wanted to bring up, it looks like the follow-up on the ordinance, is it 1033 that we testified? Kelly and I both testified on. We've sent letters. I think the governor signed it by now. Is that right? And that's the nicotine and tobacco licensing sales. It gives the county more authority to monitor and regulate tobacco and nicotine product sales. And I see in the news today that the city of Aspen is considering removing all flavored tobacco products. So we see things tightening up, and I don't think that it's a moment too soon. Now that you can't leave the city in order to buy what's prohibited in the city, and I think that's a step forward for us. And it doesn't look like there will be any financial implications regarding losing shares of sales tax revenue. That's all I have to share right now. I was looking for what else might be in here. We're hoping Snowmass Village comes across with this as well. Speak to your Snowmass Village counselors about the tobacco and nicotine ordinance.
Phyllis will be here. She's coming down the stairs right now.
Oh,
I'd love to just bring up that I've been getting comments from people that it seems like the Verizon service in the Middle Valley, say between the airport and Woody Creek, Brush Creek, that whole area where we are, seems to be falling off. And I know Verizon has come and spoken to us a year or so ago at length, and we've spent way too much time here giving us a sales pitch. But I'm just wondering if, do we want to check in with them again? Do we who do we call when the service drops? I know Basalt had a huge issue with it, and it seems like they improved the service down there.
Yeah, it's more about probably we don't have a official role in monitoring or regulating that. It's more of a public relations. We could probably find somebody to talk to. I don't know if they're having antenna issues. They had put up an antenna near Woody Creek, and it's possible that maybe that's having icing problems and such. Like
I spoke to Phyllis about it. Just the Verizon, it seems like the service has declined in the Brush Creek, Woody Creek airport area.
There have been different places where Verizon has been declining. And we've been told it's more about the unlimited data that's now being sent on phones. And I don't think Verizon has its own tower in the region.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. It's hard to see them. They don't have their own tower in the region, so I think they're secondary, like the one that's at the Elam gravel pit is just AT&T.
Okay.
So that's the one that's being used there.
Got it. So it's just it's the
too much-
use. It's the people are streaming too many videos.
It's clogging the pipe and it's going really slow, and yeah, same thing was happening in the Willits area for a while, and another tower, Verizon did put a tower up at the Valley Lumberyard in that area, and that's really helped that mid-valley. So it's almost like it moves.
So it
There's
seems
another
like,
place you drop by Aspen Village if you're traveling, not
Right.
Aspen Village, Aspen Glen. If you're traveling on 82, it's like everybody learns where your phone calls from.
so the blind spots are kind of shifting around depending on where the latest tower has gone in or not, or the population surges. And we're all on our phones too often, is what that
And
tells me.
they try to fill in, but yeah, I forget the ratio. I think it's like 70% a year increase. It's something crazy on the amount of data that's being moved around through cell. Most of that now is not calls. It's real data.
Can you update us a little bit on the whole thing with 5G? Sounds a little scary, and that it seems that municipalities and counties don't have much control, or we're concerned that they won't with the placement of all the 5G nodes. And of course, we want better service, but we don't want unsightly technical towers everywhere.
Kara has been more of a lead, along with Paul Schultz at the City of Aspen, on what's going on with 5G. Typically, municipalities are more impacted by that. But having control over where they are, especially in historic areas, and that's going to be an issue.
We are working on small cell regulations as allowed, which is it's a narrow window.
I was thinking, working in concert with the city, here's another opportunity to work in concert with the city of Aspen, and as Kelly pointed out, we want to congratulate the new counselors that have come on, and we have a new, or not a new, but we have a different, the acting city manager, and we're all very optimistic about working with Sarah and the new councilman. So hopefully, as this moves forward with 5G and with energy and with all these other issues, we're going to be tighter. I just had a comment today from someone who said, gee, wouldn't it be great if the city and the county were even more in sync than they are? Yes.
Agreed.
It would.
So we did have one open discussion item.
Oh, you
for
did? Oh, I thought you were stalling here.
Which is why I'm here.
Oh, I thought you already. Oh, cut to the chase, Phyllis. Gee.
I'm covering for Kara again.
Right.
Our network operator, Mammoth Networks, published an RFP looking for internet service providers, ISPs, and we did have 2 respond, and so we're recommending the 2 of them be included, and that's Visionary Networks, which happens to be a subsidiary of Mammoth Networks, but we have all of our questions cleared of how separate that organization is. The second one is Pathfinders, which is the same organization that is doing the project up Castle Creek. And part of the commitment for being an ISP was being able to offer service on countywide on all of our areas. They couldn't cherry pick where there were populations. So we make the recommendation. They met our minimum requirements. The county identified minimum requirements that any ISP has to meet. They both did. So Mammoth, they will be contracting with Mammoth. They don't contract with us. But we wanted to ensure that the pricing was within the restrictions that we had, and that they were willing to do service to all our areas, and that they hadn't been in business so long, and so they both met those criteria. So we're moving ahead, and I think now announcing it to you, Mammoth will do a press release and get the information out to the community.
And so the idea is that the middle mile folks will turn to them for their internet provision?
For the final mile, correct. So they will be the providers, and right now are the 3 targeted areas for this late spring, early summer. We're not sure how early we can get onto the mountaintops, given how much snow keeps coming. That's really what dictates our first time we can get out there, but it'll be on our rebuilt areas, which is the Elephant and the Crystal, Williams Hill, which is Watson Divide area, Old Snowmass, and Crown, which is Mid-Valley Basalt.
And so these providers are going to have a great look at how much snow we can get in a big year, at least, which will be useful. Hopefully, good information as they're putting up something that's resilient.
Right, and this is all fixed wireless, so it's all they'll be the providers that'll be installing whatever's needed at the home and taking care of that and providing the 24/7 service, which was another one of our requirements, being able to contact for service.
Are these ISPs going to be involved in finding the last mile towers, those final locations that seem to be, that's the challenge?
It'll probably be a partnership with us. They may identify, we have a lot of people that are asking for service that our engineers say we cannot provide service, and if we could do whatever, put a secondary tower somewhere. And then it would come back through us to figure out how that works. And whether we're installing it or they're installing it, we're hoping to get the first wave out and see where we're at, and then we'll keep moving forward. I mean, we kind of have a 3-phase, but we think after the original 3 phases, there may be a 4th phase just for that, where we find, oh, there's a pocket of something going on, and who knows what technology is going to be around in 3 years. It's moving pretty fast, so.
That's right, great, thank you.
My friends who live in Lanedo are always asking me, and I explained the 3 phases to them and said, you know, Lanedo's probably going to be phase 3. It could end up being a phase 4 one because it's a difficult location to reach into.
So it's the same problems at why we don't have service in those areas. At the distance from where main service is, and what's the population density. You know, we could have a tower per person in some geographic areas, which probably wouldn't make sense, but we'll see what we can do and what kind of technology comes about.
Great, I'm hoping that some creative solutions come forward for some of those problematic areas. There may be something you can do with a coffee can and a coat hanger. And,
we keep watching the people that are trying to do the fixed wireless via satellites. I'm not sure how that's working, but we'll see.
Yeah.
That's floating around out there.
And the Garfield County Commissioners have proposed drones, permanent drones.
I think we're a ways off.
I think we're ways off on that.
They probably ice up too.
Is that enough? Is that it?
That's it. That's my whole piece.
I wanted to bring up that tomorrow, the timing is just perfect for the Colorado River District is coming tomorrow afternoon. We'll be presenting in this room, I believe, on the state of the art and science of cloud seeding. I was going to try to find their press release, and I don't have it here. But they have experts from NCAR coming in, maybe NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, National Center for Atmospheric Research coming in for this if they can get here. And ironically, they're going to be talking about the dearth of snow, or well, not really. It's going to be talking about the science of cloud seeding and what it means. But I think the conversation may shift a little bit to weather patterns and what actually makes snow. And the idea is just to raise the level of awareness and understanding of what they're doing as they're conducting cloud seeding efforts around the state. So that's tomorrow afternoon, and it's open to the public in this room, in the County Commissioner admin building room. And that's it. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Further discussion? No public hearing on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Phyllis. Thanks, Laura. Nice to see you here. John? Now, I thought John wasn't going to show up at these things anymore. Thank you, Grassroots. We're done.
It's going to go quick.